You're listening to Frank Talks, Pleasures and Lifestyles, and I'm Donald, because I have to be, and we're back with Ken Phillips. Ken Phillips is a seduction relationship expert and author. So, I wanted to know, I was curious about the biggest obstacle you had to overcome, and what it was like eventually overcoming it.
Well, probably the biggest thing that I had to deal with was losing my grip on myself, in a sense. As you develop, you start building up this other person inside of you, essentially. And as that one person builds, the person you were starts fading and starts disappearing. And you reach a point where you kind of get the critical mass, and the two sides of you are kind of struggling for control. The old part of you knows that it's going, that it's about to die off, and a lot of its old behavior patterns and things like that are about to disappear forever. The conflict inside of yourself that creates is incredible. It's one of the most shocking things that I've ever felt in my life. I had reached this point maybe a year and a half, 2 years into my development, and it was like a war was going on inside of me. I had never expected something like this to happen. I was depressed, I was sad, I was disillusioned. I couldn't even look at a girl. Thinking about talking to a girl just brought up the whole pain of it. My old self was still clinging to the ideas of, okay, it's just supposed to happen. If you spend enough time with a girl, she'll want to be with you. All those sorts of ideas. Where my new self was saying, look, if you go in and you satisfy her emotional needs, she's going to want to be with you. Because you're doing it honestly, this is who you are now. And I had these two sides of me just going on inside of me, going, what? And they were just fighting, and it was a whole ordeal that was incredibly painful and just made me really unstable for a while. I mean, during that whole time, I was still functioning. I was still going to lair meetings, because I was still part of the lair at that time. I was still working in my professional life, in my other jobs. I was still functioning, but inside of me, there's this war going on. When I finally got past that, when my old self was finally able to accept that it wasn't going to be the dominant anymore, that things were changing and that they weren't going back to the way it was, there was a sense of calm, a sense of peace and release that I also didn't expect. Because once the part of yourself that is on its way out accepts the fact that it's on its way out, the struggle dies off quite a bit. Your new self kind of takes over, and you feel like a weight's been lifted on you, off of you. That the burden of trying to stay focused on what you're doing all the time and being conscious of everything that you're doing, a lot of that goes away. Because you don't have this other part of you weighing you down and fighting you at every turn. You're okay doing the things that you know are attractive because, well, that's who's in command, that's who's in charge.
That's interesting. So it sounds like you're describing sort of the last push in your development. It sounds like after you get past that, a lot of your change work is done. Is that right?
A lot of it is most definitely done at that point. Not all of it, because there's always a few things to wrap up. And no one's ever really done in their development because there's always more things to learn.
Oh, okay.
But at that point, I would say a huge chunk of the work is done.
Okay. And was there ever a time that you wanted to give up, and what made you keep going?
There were at least a few of those situations during the course of my development. I mean, you face enough rejection, you face enough girls not showing up when they say they will. You go on enough bad dates with girls that you don't really like and you can't connect with, that you get to a point where, you ask yourself, is this really worth it? Do I really want to keep going?
Mm-hmm.
Every time I ever ask myself that question, I always got the answer, no, you're going to keep going. You see, when I got into this, when I said, okay, I'm going to get this figured out, I had initially committed myself for 10 years. The reason I picked 10 years was because before this, I was a musician, and one of my favorite musicians, what he would say was, the hardest part about being a musician is the first 10 years.
Okay.
Once you've got that handled, it's a lot easier to play music. It's a lot easier to be musical and just generally be able to perform and express yourself through the music. So when I came to the study of seduction, I figured, okay, 10 years, that's what I'm committing. It was sheer coincidence that I ended up meeting the people that I did, learning the things that I did in a fraction of the time.
Okay.
So were there times that I wanted to quit? Most definitely. But I had promised myself when I started out that I would not. And if I can't keep a promise to myself, well, nobody in the world is going to be willing to trust me.
Right.